My name is Precious and I'm 28 years old now. But this story starts when I was just 16, lying in a hospital bed, watching my phone buzz with messages about my sister's upcoming birthday party. Messages I couldn't bring myself to read. I remember the exact moment when everything changed for me. It was a Tuesday afternoon in March and I was supposed to be in chemistry class. Instead, I was doubled over in the school bathroom, feeling like someone was stabbing me in the stomach with a hot knife. The pain had been getting worse for weeks, but I'd been trying to ignore it. We didn't have health insurance and I knew money was tight at home. My teacher, Mrs. Peterson, found me there and insisted on calling my parents. Dad came to pick me up, his face tight with worry and something else I couldn't quite identify. Maybe annoyance. He drove me to the emergency room in silence, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. "We'll figure this out," he kept saying, more to himself than to me. "We'll figure this out." The emergency room was crowded and smelled like disinfectant and fear. We waited for hours before a doctor finally saw me. After what felt like endless tests and questions, Dr. Martinez pulled my dad aside. I could see them talking through the glass window of my room, their voices too low for me to hear. But I could read Dad's face perfectly. His shoulders sagged, and he ran his hands through his hair the way he always did when he was stressed about money. "Precious," Dr. Martinez said when he came back into my room, "you have appendicitis. It's quite advanced and we need to operate immediately." "How much?" Dad asked quietly. "Without insurance, you're looking at about $1,000, the doctor replied. "But that's if we do it today. If we wait any longer, it could rupture and then we're talking about much more complicated surgery and a much higher cost." I watched my dad's face crumble. $1,000 might as well have been $1 million to us then. Mom had been out of work for months since the factory closed, and Dad's construction job barely covered our basic expenses. Can we wait a few days?" Dad asked. "Maybe get a second opinion?" Dr. Martinez's expression grew stern. "Mr. Chin, your daughter's appendix could rupture at any time. This is not something you wait on." That's when Dad made the phone call that would change everything. He stepped out into the hallway and I could hear him talking to someone. His voice was pleading, desperate. "Please, Mom," he was saying. "It's just $1,000. Precious needs surgery today." My grandmother had always been the backbone of our family, the one with savings and investments. But I could only hear Dad's side of the conversation and it wasn't going well. "I understand that Rachel's party is important," he continued, "but this is a medical emergency." My heart sank. Rachel was my younger sister and her sweet 16 was coming up next month. Mom and Grandma had been planning it for months, talking about venues and caterers and flowers. I'd heard them mention numbers that made my head spin, but I'd never really understood what it all meant. "Please," Dad said again, his voice breaking. "She's your granddaughter too." When he came back into the room, I could see he'd been crying. "We're going to find another way," he told me, forcing a smile. "Don't worry, sweetheart." But there was no other way, not really. We couldn't afford the surgery, and no payment plan the hospital offered was something my parents could manage. So I was given pain medication and sent home with strict instructions to return immediately if the pain got worse. For the next 3 days I lay in my bed trying not to move, trying not to breathe too deeply. The pain was constant now, a burning ache that made it hard to think about anything else. Mom would bring me soup and sit with me for a few minutes, but then she'd get a phone call about flower arrangements or invitation designs and she'd hurry away. "The party planner needs to know about the color scheme," she'd explain, kissing my forehead quickly before rushing out. "Rachel tried to visit me once, but she seemed uncomfortable and awkward." "I'm sorry you're sick," she said, shifting from foot to foot in my doorway. Maybe after my party we can hang out more?" I wanted to scream. I wanted to grab her and shake her and tell her that her party was costing more than some people made in a year. That while she was picking out dress colors, I was scared I might die. But I just nodded and pretended to fall asleep until she left. On the 4th day I woke up feeling different. The sharp, stabbing pain was gone, replaced by something much worse, a deep, spreading ache that felt like poison flowing through my body. I tried to call for my parents, but only a whisper came out. I managed to stumble to the bathroom, and that's where Dad found me an hour later, collapsed on the floor, burning with fever. My appendix had ruptured. The next few days were a blur of emergency surgery for drips and worried doctors. The operation was successful, but because we'd waited so long, there were complications. I developed an infection that kept me in the hospital for 2 weeks. The final bill was over $15,000. From my hospital bed, I watched my sister's party unfold through social media posts and the excited phone calls Mom took right outside my room. She'd step into the hallway to talk about last-minute details, her voice animated in a way it never was when she talked to the doctors about my condition. "The flowers look absolutely perfect," I heard her tell someone. "The venue is gorgeous. Rachel's going to feel like a princess." The party was everything they dreamed it would be. I saw the photos later. Rachel in a custom-made gown that cost more than my surgery would have, 200 guests, a live band, elaborate decorations, and a cake that looked like it belonged in a fairy tale. My parents posted picture after picture, beaming with pride. The total cost, I found out later when Dad was arguing with Grandma about the hospital bills, was close to $200,000. $200,000 for one night, when $1,000 could have saved me weeks of pain and prevented a life-threatening situation. It wasn't just about the money, though. It was about what that money represented. It was about priorities and choices and what really mattered to my family. As I lay in that hospital bed watching the photos from the party roll across my phone screen, I realized something that would change my life forever. I was not a priority in my own family. When I finally came home from the hospital, weak and pale and carrying medical debt that would follow my family for years, the house was still decorated with leftover party supplies. Rachel's tiara sat on the kitchen counter, and bouquets of expensive flowers were slowly wilting in crystal vases. "Welcome home, sweetheart," Mom said, giving me a careful hug. "We saved you some cake." I looked at the elaborate leftover cake in the refrigerator, probably worth more than the daily medication I needed to take for my recovery, and something inside me broke. Not broke like something that could be fixed, but broke like something that was permanently changed. "Thank you," I said quietly. That night, as I lay in my bed trying to find a comfortable position despite the incision pain, I made a decision. I was going to leave. Not right away, I was too weak, too young, too dependent. But I was going to build a life where my worth wasn't determined by how much attention I brought to the family or how much celebration I required. I spent the rest of my junior year working every job I could manage while keeping up with my grades. I babysat for neighbors, walked dogs, tutored younger students, and saved every penny. I applied for scholarships and filled out financial aid forms in secret. My parents were dealing with their own financial crisis from the hospital bills and seemed almost relieved that I was taking care of myself. Precious has always been independent. Mom would tell people, as if independence was something I'd chosen rather than something that had been forced on me. The day after graduation, I left for college across the country. I had a full scholarship to a state school, a part-time job already lined up, and a dorm room that was smaller than Rachel's walk-in closet but felt like freedom to me. My parents seemed surprised by my choice. "It's so far away," Mom said, tears in her eyes at the airport. "And you could have gone to the community college here." "I need to do this," I told her. "I need to build my own life." College was hard. I worked 2 jobs while carrying a full course load. I studied business and economics, fascinated by numbers and markets and the power of financial independence. I lived on ramen noodles and determination, sending occasional updates home but never asking for help. During those 4 years, I watched my family through social media and brief phone calls. Rachel got a car for her 18th birthday, not just any car, but a brand new SUV with a giant bow on top. She went to Europe for spring break with her friends. She had a graduation party that rivaled her sweet 16. Meanwhile, I worked in restaurants and tutored students and slowly, methodically built my savings account. I graduated with honors and a job offer from a consulting firm in the city. The years that followed were a whirlwind of 12-hour workdays, client meetings, and climbing the corporate ladder. I was good at my job, maybe because I understood what it felt like to have to fight for every dollar, every opportunity. I lived in a tiny apartment and drove a used car, but my bank account grew steadily. By the time I was 25, I had my own small consulting business. By 27, I owned my apartment and had investments that my college economics professor would have been proud of. I sent Christmas cards home and remembered birthdays, but I kept my distance emotionally and financially. Last month, everything came full circle. Dad called me on a Tuesday evening, his voice carrying the same desperate tone I remembered from that hospital hallway phone call 12 years ago. "Precious," he said, "I need to ask you something and it's not easy for me." I knew what was coming before he said it. The construction industry had been hit hard by the economic downturn. Mom still couldn't find steady work. Rachel had gotten married last year in a wedding that cost more than most people's houses, and now she was struggling with her own finances. "We need help," Dad admitted. "The house is going into foreclosure and we don't know where else to turn. I know we haven't always. I know things haven't been perfect between us. But you're doing so well and your family." I sat in my apartment, the apartment I'd bought with money I'd earned through years of sacrifice and hard work, and felt the old familiar ache in my stomach. Not physical pain this time, but emotional pain that ran just as deep. "How much do you need?" I asked quietly. 50,000 would save the house, he said. "I know it's a lot, but we'll pay you back. I promise." $50,000. It was a significant amount, but not impossible for me. I could afford it without destroying my own financial security. The question wasn't whether I could help, it was whether I should. "Dad," I said finally, "do you remember when I was 16 and needed surgery? Do you remember what that cost?" There was silence on the other end of the line. "That was different," he said eventually. "That was medical. We found a way to handle it." "You found a way to handle it by letting my appendix rupture and almost killing me," I replied, "while you spent $200,000 on Rachel's birthday party. Precious, that's not fair. Your grandmother paid for most of that party. It wasn't our money." "But you asked her for help for Rachel's party," I said. "You fought for that money. You made sure she got everything she dreamed of. But when I needed $1,000 to save my life, that same grandmother couldn't be bothered." "This is different," Dad insisted. "We're family. We help each other." I almost laughed. Where was that philosophy when I was lying in a hospital bed watching Instagram posts of ice sculptures and flower walls and custom dresses? Where was "we're family" when I was 17 years old working 3 jobs to pay for school while Rachel got a brand new car? "You've done well for yourself," Dad said, and I could hear the desperation creeping back into his voice. "You didn't need our help." "I did need your help," I said quietly. "I needed it for 16 years and I learned to live without it. I learned that I could only depend on myself." "So you won't help us?" I looked around my apartment, my beautiful, peaceful apartment that I'd furnished with money I'd earned and saved. I thought about the scared 16-year-old girl lying in a hospital bed, feeling abandoned and forgotten. I thought about the young woman who'd left home with 2 suitcases and a fierce determination to never be helpless again. "I'm not ready to help you," I said finally. "Maybe someday I will be. But right now I need you to understand what it feels like to figure things out on your own." "Precious, please," Dad said, his voice breaking. "We're desperate." "So was I replied. "And you let me stay that way." After I hung up, I sat in my living room for a long time thinking about family and forgiveness and the price of love. I thought about Rachel, who probably didn't even remember that my surgery happened around the time of her party. I thought about my parents, who had loved me in their own way but had never made me feel like a priority. People might think I'm cruel for refusing to help. They might say that family comes first, that forgiveness is important, that holding grudges only hurts yourself. And maybe they're right. Maybe someday I'll be ready to help, to forgive, to rebuild those relationships. But right now, I'm still that 16-year-old girl who learned that her family would spend $200,000 on a party but wouldn't spend $1,000 to save her life. And that girl deserves better than to be taken for granted again. I built my life from nothing because I had to. I became successful because no one was going to save me. And now that success is mine, earned through years of sacrifice and determination and late nights wondering if I was strong enough to make it on my own. I was strong enough. I'm strong enough. And I'm not ready to share that strength with people who never valued it when I needed them most. That $1,000 they couldn't find when I needed it taught me more about life than they'll ever know. It taught me that love without action is just words. It taught me that family isn't always the people who share your blood. And it taught me that sometimes the best thing you can do for yourself is walk away. So I'm walking away. And for the first time in my life, I'm okay with being the daughter who said no. Thank you for listening. If you love listening to revenge stories, this channel is dedicated to bring daily revenge stories that will inspire you. Please like and subscribe to our channel for more of this content coming your way.